A corrupt cop and his associates held a woman hostage, unaware she was a skilled, retired U.S. military veteran. In the heart of Memphis, Tennessee, where the mighty Mississippi River cuts through a city both proud of its musical roots and burdened by hidden shadows, a storm of betrayal brewed. Alara Vance, a seemingly ordinary woman caring for her aging mother, stepped off a late-night bus, unaware that her quiet world was about to explode into chaos. Cop Marcus Thorne and his ruthless associates had set a trap for an easy target, oblivious to the fact that Alara was no ordinary civilian. Behind her gentle smile and down-to-earth demeanor lay the strength and cunning of a highly skilled, retired U.S. Army veteran who once trained at Fort Bragg. Memphis was a city of dualities. On one hand, the bright neon signs of Beale Street offered a sense of excitement and cultural richness. Echoes of B.B. King's guitar riffs still haunted corners of the lively nightlife scene. On the other hand, entire neighborhoods remained starkly cut off, riddled with poverty, crime, and corruption that festered in the dark. In the summer of 2023, this contrast was at its peak. Sirens screamed in the night, and the humidity gripped every street and alley like a vice. Inside a cramped one-bedroom apartment in North Memphis, Alara Vance flipped through an old photo album. She had spent years on the move, serving her country in distant lands. Now she was back where she started, caring for her ailing mother, Vera Vance. After completing her final deployment, Alara chose early retirement rather than re-enlisting. She didn't regret her decision to come home and look after her mother, who was suffering from advanced rheumatoid arthritis and failing eyesight. But sometimes, particularly on nights when the humid wind carried the hint of stale whiskey and peppery barbecue, Alara couldn't help but yearn for the clarity of military structure, knowing your mission, your objective, your enemy. In Memphis, though, it was harder to figure out friend from foe, especially when those wearing badges weren't always the good guys. Officer Marcus Thorne had been a rising star in the Memphis Police Department for years. He first joined straight out of the academy, dazzling supervisors with his sharp intelligence and calm under pressure. He had successfully navigated the labyrinth of district politics, earning awards for courage on duty, though many close to him knew he had a special talent for stepping into the limelight at just the right moment. Over time, the city's underbelly sank its claws into him. It was subtle at first, a small bribe here, an overlooked piece of evidence there. Before long, Thorne found himself entangled with a local ring of criminals led by a man named Silas Craven. Silas ran a network smuggling drugs and stolen goods through the city's industrial corridors. Memphis, with its prime location along major highways, was the perfect waypoint. Thorne saw an opportunity to make easy money. He started feeding Silas's crew inside information, tips on police raids, competitor drug stashes, and local informants whose tongues waggled too freely. In return, he received cash payments, hidden in shoe boxes and wired to offshore accounts under a false identity. He also got a share of the stolen goods, which he'd resell for profit. As the years passed, Thorne refined his side hustle. He formed a small circle of men he trusted. Ex-cop Malachi Cole, who'd been forced out of the force after a suspicious shooting, a muscle-bound enforcer named Jonas Stonehouse Ridge, and Leo Miles, a fast-talking hustler who specialized in forging official documents. This group functioned like a mini syndicate, operating under the cloak of Thorne's badge. For a while, everything ran smoothly. Thorne presented himself as a dedicated policeman by day while orchestrating robberies and facilitating extortion schemes at night. But he had grown arrogant, and arrogance often leads to sloppy mistakes. His thirst for power led him to attempt bigger hauls and riskier jobs. The lines between his official police work and his criminal undertakings blurred dangerously. Alara's world intersected with Thorne's on a sweltering July night. She had just returned from the local VA hospital, where she was picking up medication for her mother. The city bus hissed to a stop, and Alara disembarked, stepping into the thick, stagnant air. She wore a loose-fitting olive green t-shirt, a casual nod to her military days, and practical jeans. Her hair was tied back in a short ponytail, and a small backpack held her mother's prescriptions along with her old, battered copy of The Art of War by Sun Tzu, an ironic companion she often carried for comfort. Alara never suspected she was being watched. A dull silver sedan idled across the street. Inside sat Leo Miles. He was on an errand for Thorne, scout for an easy mark. Times were lean, and Thorne's crew was desperate for a quick score. They'd pick a random pedestrian who looked vulnerable enough to rob, or maybe kidnap for ransom if they were feeling bold. The corruption on the force allowed them to get away with brazen crimes. Thorne had half the precinct either complicit or too afraid to speak out. Leo dialed a number on his burner phone. "Yo, I see a woman. She got that army t-shirt, but she looks real normal. Probably an ex or something," he reported, all alone, sizing her up. On the other end, Thorne's cold, measured voice crackled. "Follow her. If she's alone, do it clean. Snatch her purse, or maybe just bring her in if it looks like she has any connection to money, or we can use her to set an example if she's got family. Up to you." Alara glanced over her shoulder just once, a tingle of her old training telling her something was off. But the street was mostly empty, aside from an older couple arguing about the bus schedule. She walked quickly, stepping over cracked sidewalks, trying to reach her block before the sky unleashed its promised late-night thunderstorm. When Leo revved the engine and slowly pulled up beside her, Alara felt the hair on the back of her neck stand. She pivoted, adjusting her grip on her backpack, scanning for potential threats. But it was too late. Leo had hopped out, brandishing a small pistol. He held it low, near his hip, away from public view. "Hey lady, how about we take a walk?" Leo hissed, gesturing with the gun. Alara's mind clicked into an old gear, a mixture of rational calm and coiled reflexes. Rule number 1 in hostage situations: if you're unarmed and outnumbered, you have to judge whether compliance might buy you time or whether you can disarm your aggressor safely. But Alara had spotted a second figure moving between parked cars. That had to be Stonehouse, looming like a giant shadow. He would close in if she tried anything rash. Cautiously, Alara raised her hands. "All right, don't shoot." She kept her voice steady. She needed more intel. At least for now, cooperating was the best approach. After all, she was in enemy territory with minimal advantage. Leo signaled, and Stonehouse shoved Alara into the back of the sedan, slamming the door shut. The old Alara, Sergeant Alara Vance of the 82nd Airborne, parachutist and expert in close-quarters combat, was screaming from within, but for now, she was pinned. Memphis's endless grid of back streets and rundown neighborhoods provided the perfect cover for criminals like Thorne's crew. They drove to a ramshackle house in a nearly abandoned block. Overgrown lawns and boarded windows marked it as a no-go zone. The sedan rolled past battered mailboxes with peeling numbers until it arrived at a property with tall, unkempt hedges. Alara was dragged inside, backpack confiscated, forced to sit on a creaking wooden chair in what appeared to be a living room turned hideout. Yellowed wallpaper peeled from the walls, and a flickering overhead bulb cast ominous shadows. Silas Craven, Thorne's boss on the street side, was there waiting for them. He was a wiry man with narrow shoulders and hawk-like eyes, dressed in a crisp black shirt that contrasted with the grime of the place. "So she's the one you picked?" Silas asked, his voice condescending. Stonehouse nodded, crossing his arms. Leo paced around Alara, studying her face. "Is she worth anything?" Silas continued, stepping closer to Alara and tilting her chin upward with 2 fingers. Unflinching, Alara stared back, forcing her expression to remain neutral. She wouldn't show fear. Fear was a predator's feast. "I don't know yet," Leo replied. "We can call some numbers on her phone, see if she's got family with money. Maybe we can hold her for ransom or make her do something." Silas smirked. "You'd be surprised how desperate folks can be around here to save a loved one. But you said she's ex-military?" "Retired maybe," Leo answered. "She was wearing an army t-shirt. Could be nothing. Could be a problem if she's skilled." Silas raised an eyebrow. "We'll find out." He turned away as if bored already. "Tie her up. Toss her in the basement. We'll figure out what to do once Thorne gets here." That's when Alara knew she had a window of opportunity. Being moved meant potential mistakes by her captors. She couldn't rely on them continuing to underestimate her if they realized the extent of her training. So she went limp, acting more fragile than she was. "Let them think I'm docile," she thought, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The basement was a dank, spider-infested pit. It smelled of mold and stale water, with a single overhead light that buzzed like a dying insect. Stonehouse shoved Alara down the creaky stairs, letting her stumble across the cement floor. He pointed his gun at her as Leo tossed a coil of rope to him. "Make sure she can't break free," Leo said. Alara kept her limbs slack, acting submissive. Stonehouse bound her wrists behind her, not too gently, but he didn't pay enough attention to her ankles, opting for a simple loop of rope. Both men left, and Alara heard the basement door slam shut. The click of the lock slid into place, but the muffled sounds of Silas and the others remained overhead. Time to evaluate. Her pulse pounded, but her mind stayed clear. She tested the ropes around her wrists. The knots were tight, but she had learned a few infiltration and restraint escape techniques during her years of service. She also had a small advantage. Stonehouse had used one length of rope for her wrists and another for her ankles, meaning the two sets of restraints weren't connected. That gave her a bit more freedom to twist while she worked her hands. Alara took in her surroundings. There were crates stacked against the walls, possibly containing stolen items or contraband. There was a broken table saw in one corner, along with a pile of rotted wood. If she could free herself, maybe she could find a useful tool. Upstairs, muffled voices rose, and Alara recognized a new speaker's tone. It was authoritative, but not Silas's. The basement ceiling made eavesdropping difficult, but then she heard the name Thorn. That had to be the corrupt cop they spoke about. "We have her phone. We'll see what she's worth," said Leo's voice, carrying through the thin floorboards. "Might have some valuable contacts or something. Check if she's got any military buddies with deep pockets." Another voice responded. Tasha assumed that was Thorn. "Or if not, we can always get rid of her. I'm not risking a trail back to us." Alara's jaw clenched. So that was their plan. She was either a payday or a liability to be disposed of. She twisted her arms in the rope. Her memory drifted back to training sessions at Fort Bragg, where an old instructor named Master Sergeant Hayes had taught them how to dislocate a thumb to slip out of restraints in dire scenarios. Alara grimaced. Could she do that here? If push came to shove, yes, but first, she'd try less painful methods. For nearly an hour, Alara gradually loosened the rope, rotating her wrists just enough to open up tiny gaps. She needed to be patient and quiet, ignoring the pins and needles traveling up her forearms. Then she heard footsteps thundering down the stairs. Jonas Stonehouse Ridge stood there, holding a plastic water bottle. Behind him was Malachi Cole, the ex-cop, who looked perpetually on edge, as though he expected bullets from every angle. Stonehouse approached, unscrewing the cap and tilting water into Alara's mouth with mechanical indifference. She sipped, but not too much. She didn't want to look ungrateful or strong, just plain docile. Malachi hovered in the background, his posture stiff. "If she tries anything, I'll shoot," he muttered, brandishing a Glock 19. The brand was standard police issue, ironically turning on the same citizens it was meant to protect. Alara's eyes flicked to the Glock. Noted. She coughed a bit to garner their pity. One more act. Stonehouse shrugged. "We'll see if she breaks. Silas wants me to do some, convincing if she don't talk." Malachi grimaced, betraying a flicker of discomfort. "We do what we have to. Thorn wants no loose ends." At that moment, Alara almost pitted Malachi. The ex-cop seemed conflicted, as though he'd fallen into this life out of desperation rather than cruelty. It could be a weakness Alara might exploit. They left after a few minutes, having gleaned no valuable information, seemingly content that their hostage was compliant. Once the basement door slammed again, Alara allowed herself a series of measured breaths. She had gained a valuable insight. Not all of them were equally heartless. In a crisis, that difference might be crucial. The next morning, far from the dilapidated house, an earnest detective named Camila Reyes sat at her desk at the Memphis Police Department's downtown precinct. She was a rarity in the department, utterly incorruptible. She'd been quietly investigating suspicious patterns of tip-offs and unsolved cases that pointed to a mole in the ranks. A puzzling series of break-ins, robberies, and kidnappings had gone unconnected by official channels, but Camila sensed a thread tying them together. She sipped stale coffee while sifting through case files. Each incident had glaring signs of inside knowledge. Security cameras conveniently offline, alarms disarmed with official codes. Yet every time she brought these concerns to her superiors, the conversation was quickly shut down. Perhaps it was a coincidence, or perhaps she was treading too close to some uncomfortable truths. Her phone rang, a private number. Camila hesitated, then answered. "Hello, Detective Reyes." The voice was male, hushed. "I'm a concerned citizen. I have info about a group kidnapping people for ransom. One of them's a cop." Camila's heart pounded. "Who is this?" "Can't say. You were the only honest detective I could find. If you want to know more, check out the vacant properties near the old rail yard." The house with the broken gate. They got someone there. You'd better move fast. Otherwise, well, you know how these things go. The line went dead. Camila sprang into action. She requested backup from a trusted officer, Evan Holt, one of the few colleagues she felt sure wasn't on the take. Officially, she said they were checking out a tip about squatters. She didn't mention kidnappings or the rumor of a corrupt cop on the phone. In Memphis's labyrinth of partial allegiances, the fewer people who knew the truth, the better. Back in the basement, Alara had managed to loosen her wrist restraints enough to reduce the circulation problems, though her hands still appeared tied. She couldn't risk fully untying them yet in case someone popped in. Instead, she tested small stretches, enough to confirm she could slip free when the time came. Soon, Thorne himself came downstairs, flanked by Silas. Malachi hovered behind them, arms crossed. Thorne was tall, his police uniform crisp. On the surface, he exuded that classic good cop presence, yet his eyes were cold, predatory. "Look at you, Miss Army," Thorne said. "We checked your ID. Alara Vance. Fort Bragg, right? You're not some clueless civilian." Alara glared at him. No use pretending now. They knew her background. "Never thought a Memphis police officer would be a traitor," she said, voice even. "You disgrace that badge." Thorne laughed humorlessly. "The badge is just a tool, like anything else. Now, how about you tell me if you've got family who can pay? We found your phone, but it's locked. We can crack it eventually, though. Better to make this easy." Alara's mind raced. She had set a passcode on her phone, plus a biometric lock. They wouldn't easily get inside. She weighed her response carefully. If she pretended her mother was wealthy, they might try to extort her. But if they discovered Vera's financial situation, that might enrage them. She stayed silent. Silas took a step closer, eyes narrowing. "We can do this the hard way." Thorne sighed in mock disappointment. "I'd prefer not to get messy. But if we have to, Malachi here is used to making problems disappear, right?" Malachi swallowed, a flicker of discomfort crossing his face again. Alara noticed. Thorne perhaps didn't. "I'm retired military," Alara finally said. "My mother's on disability. You won't get a fortune from me." Silas smirked. "You'd be surprised what old army friends might cough up for your safe return. Or maybe we'll just kill you and move on," Thorne added. "Frankly, you're becoming a nuisance." Alara weighed her options. Continue playing captive or attempt to strike now. She wasn't fully ready. 3 armed men in close quarters was still too great a risk. So she forced a resigned look. "Fine," she said. "I'll give you the phone password. But promise me you won't hurt my mother." Thorne motioned for Silas to hold the phone out. "Let's see." Alara gave them a fake passcode, hoping it might buy her time. Silas typed it in. "No good. She's lying," he snapped. Thorne's eyes hardened. He nodded to Silas. "Do what you must. We'll try again later." They stomped upstairs, leaving Alara alone to brace for the possibility of torture. Her heartbeat thudded, but she inhaled deeply, focusing on her training. Fear was natural, but panic was lethal. Minutes later, Stonehouse came down, brandishing a length of thick chain. Alara realized this was likely Silas's idea of convincing. He strolled toward her with sadistic eagerness. "All right, soldier," Stonehouse said. "You want to play tough? Let's see how tough you are." He uncoiled the chain, the metal links scraping across the floor. Alara's gaze darted to the top of the stairs. If she screamed, would the neighbors hear? Probably not in this forsaken block. Stonehouse swung the chain menacingly. Alara stayed still, letting her body remain limp, but she was ready. Her wrists were loose in the rope. She braced for the first blow, ignoring the trembling in her stomach. She dealt with pain before. She just needed the right opening to fight back. The chain whipped downward, striking the floor near her ankles, a warning shot. He was savoring the intimidation. Alara's mind flicked to her hand-to-hand combat training. She'd faced bigger men in the army. She knew that agility and strategy beat brute strength. Yet she was still bound, and he had a weapon. He raised the chain again. This time, Alara angled her legs, letting the rope around her ankles take the brunt of the strike. The force stung, but the rope also partially protected her. She hissed in pain, playing up the injury. Stonehouse seemed gratified by her reaction. He paused to grin sadistically. "It doesn't have to be like this," she murmured. "I'm sure I can figure out a number to call." Stonehouse snorted. "That's right, Beg." He swung again. But this time, Alara yanked her wrists free from the rope and rolled sideways. Her sudden move caught him off guard. The chain clanged against the concrete, missing her. In one fluid motion, Alara sprang up, ignoring the rope still at her ankles. launching a powerful elbow strike at Stonehouse's temple. Her blow stunned him, and he stumbled backward. The chain slipped from his grip. She quickly hopped over to him, the rope around her ankles preventing full mobility, but she managed to drive her knee into his stomach, forcing the air out of his lungs. Then she grabbed the chain. She knew she had mere seconds before someone heard the commotion. She looped the chain around his neck from behind, applying a choke hold. Stonehouse's eyes bulged. He struggled, but his large frame began to go slack. Alara dropped him to the floor, where he lay unconscious. She forced herself to push aside the wave of pity. This was life or death. Quickly, she tore at the rope around her ankles, freeing them at last. She rummaged through Stonehouse's pockets, finding a small folding knife. No gun, unfortunately, but she took the knife and eyed the basement door. If she rushed upstairs now, she'd face Thorn, Silas, Malachi, and possibly Leo. That was suicide. She needed a better plan or a diversion. Her eyes darted to the crates. Maybe she could find a weapon among the stolen goods. She pried open a small crate with the folding knife. Inside were electronics, tablets, phones, gaming consoles. Another crate contained random hardware. Then she opened one near the far wall, and her heart skipped. Firearms. Silas's smuggling ring had them stashed. Alara rummaged until she found a loaded 9mm pistol, a brand she recognized as a Smith & Wesson M&P9. She checked the magazine. 8 rounds. Enough. She heard footsteps above. They were coming to investigate. She had to act fast or hide. Her military instincts took charge, an ambush scenario. She flicked off the overhead basement light, plunging the room into darkness. Then she ducked behind the crates, positioning herself for a clear line of sight on the stairs. Sure enough, the door flew open, and yellow light from above cast Thorn's silhouette on the stairs. Stonehouse. Thorn snapped. Stonehouse, you down there? No response. Alara steadied her breathing, finger near the trigger. The slightest misstep could lead to a firefight. She realized with a pang that the muzzle flash and noise from a gun battle might alert the entire crew, but there was no turning back. Thorn started descending. Malachi followed, flashlight in one hand, Glock in the other. Silas remained at the top, gun drawn. Alara's heart pounded. She forced herself to remain calm, letting them come closer. Thorn saw Stonehouse's unconscious body sprawled on the floor. He cursed under his breath. She's loose. In that moment, Alara popped up from behind the crates. She fired twice, aiming low. Her shot slammed into Thorn's thigh and side. He dropped to the stairs, howling. Malachi swung the flashlight beam toward her, but Alara squeezed off another round. She missed wide, but the flash forced Malachi to leap back. She ducked behind the crates as Malachi returned fire. Bullets ricocheted off concrete, sending sparks flying. Silas roared from the top of the stairs. Kill her. Stonehouse groaned, waking up in confusion. Alara grimaced, realizing he might rejoin the fight. The situation was critical. She peered around the crate, seeing Thorn writhing in pain on the steps. Malachi advanced carefully, muzzle of his Glock pointed toward her. Silas waited up top, presumably covering the exit. Alara took a deep breath. She counted bullets. She had fired 3. 5 left. Malachi's Glock likely had around 15, but that was if the magazine was full. She had to use cunning. She spotted a stack of crates near the base of the stairs. If she could tip them over, it might create a barrier or distraction. Quickly, she slid across the floor, ignoring the stinging in her ankles from Stonehouse's earlier assault. She rolled behind the stack of crates and gave them a hard shove. The entire pile began to topple. Malachi shouted, stumbling back as the crates tumbled down the stairs, some rolling into Thorn, who cursed in agony. Amid the chaos, Alara sprinted to the side, where the basement's small, narrow window sat. The glass was grimy, barred from the outside. She was trapped unless she could remove the bars or get past Silas upstairs. Silas, hearing the ruckus, fired blindly into the basement. Bullets cracked overhead. Alara ducked behind a support pillar. She needed a new plan. Then she heard sirens. They were faint but growing louder. Did someone call the police? If so, it might be more of Thorn's crooked men, or it might be actual honest cops responding to a tip. She couldn't assume friend or foe. Malachi, pinned behind the half-collapsed crates, shouted to Silas, "We got to go. That's the cavalry coming, or the real cops." Thorn's hit. Silas cursed. Grab Thorn and get to the cars. Leo, Get Alara if you can, but we're leaving. In that instant, Alara recognized this was her best chance. The criminals were distracted. She dashed toward the stairs. Malachi, seeing movement, fired 3 rounds, each zinging off the wall. Alara raised her pistol and returned 2 shots. One struck the railing, the other hit Malachi's shoulder. He yelped, dropping his flashlight as he collapsed onto the stairs. Silas fired down at her, but Alara ducked to the side. Stonehouse, still dazed, tried to stand. Alara kicked him hard in the ribs as she passed, ensuring he stayed down. She approached Malachi, pressing her gun to his chest. Blood trickled from his shoulder. He trembled, eyes wide with fear. Stay put, Alara hissed. She wasn't here to kill if she didn't have to, but she wouldn't let him raise his gun. She kicked it away, then hurried up the stairs. Silas had retreated through the door, presumably to the main level. Alara entered the living room, guns sweeping from left to right. Gunpowder lingered in the stale air. She saw a back door slamming shut. Silas was escaping. As Alara edged toward the front door, she found Leo lurking near a window. He spun around, brandishing a pistol. She fired first. The bullet clipped his arm. He screeched, dropping the weapon, and crashed into an old couch. Alara advanced, snagged his pistol, and kicked it behind her. I suggest you stay down, Alara snapped. Leo cradled his bleeding arm, eyes full of stunned disbelief. What are you, a superhero or something? He rasped. She ignored him and peeked out the front window. Silas was running toward 2 cars parked in the street, Thorne's silver sedan and an older black SUV. Thorne was nowhere in sight, likely still incapacitated. Stonehouse was in the basement. Malachi was wounded. Leo was out of commission. Silas might be alone out there, or there could be more men. Then Alara spotted a police cruiser rounding the corner. Her heart lurched. This could be real backup or crooked cops. She had no way of knowing. She weighed her options, remain inside or slip out the back. She heard the cruiser skid to a stop. 2 figures emerged, Detective Camila Reyes and Officer Evan Holt. Alara didn't know them, but the way they moved, cautious, standard police procedure, gave her hope. Silas fired at the cruiser. The bullets pinged off the hood. Camila and Evan dove behind the doors, returning fire. Alara inhaled, kicked the front door open, and joined the firefight from the porch. She saw Silas pinned behind Thorne's sedan, exchanging shots with the new arrivals. Alara raised her pistol and squeezed off 2 rounds. One shattered the sedan's side mirror. Silas ducked, returning a volley at Alara. She took cover behind the door frame. The sirens grew louder, more vehicles converging. Silas glanced around, realized he was outgunned, and sprinted for the SUV. He fired a last wild shot at Camila, who narrowly avoided it, then peeled away with screeching tires. Freeze! Camila yelled in futility, but Silas was gone. Alara raised her hands, stepping out onto the porch, the pistol pointed downward. I'm not your enemy, she called. I was kidnapped. The basement is full of suspects. Camila locked eyes with Alara. Evan covered her. They recognized the scene's chaos. Bullet holes, wounded men moaning inside, and Alara with a gun. Camila carefully approached, weapon still drawn. Ma'am, put the gun down, nice and slow. Alara placed the pistol on the porch, hands in the air. I'm Alara Vance. They kidnapped me last night. Evan peeked into the house, seeing Leo and hearing Malachi's groans. We've got at least 2 injured suspects in here, he shouted to Camila. Within minutes, more squad cars and an ambulance arrived. Alara felt an overwhelming wave of relief and exhaustion crash over her. She sank onto the porch steps, letting an EMT check her bruises. She gave her statement to Camila, recounting everything from the moment she stepped off the bus to the basement confrontation. She didn't omit Thorne's involvement, explaining that he was the ringleader in uniform. Camila's face darkened with anger at the mention of Thorne's name. It confirmed what she'd suspected all along. There was rot in the department. Where is Thorne now? Camila asked. In the basement, wounded, Alara said, wincing as the EMT cleaned a laceration on her arm. He got shot in the leg. Inside, Malachi's also shot in the shoulder. Leo is in the living room, shot in the arm. Camila radioed for more paramedics and an immediate cordon of the property. She and Evan carefully descended the basement stairs, guns drawn, to find Thorne and Malachi. Both men were lying amid the scattered crates, still conscious, though Thorne was losing blood fast. Camila knelt and disarmed them, calling for the paramedics to come down. Thorne glared up at Camila, spitting out a curse. She stared right back, no pity in her eyes. Marcus Thorne, you're under arrest, she said coldly, for kidnapping, attempted murder, corruption, and that's just the start. Thorne tried to speak, but only a strangled gasp emerged, his bravado gone, replaced by agony. Malachi just stared at the ceiling, feeling as if wishing it was all a bad dream. Upstairs, Alara listened to the controlled chaos, a swirl of uniforms, paramedics, questions, evidence photos. She let them do their work, letting the heaviness of relief settle in. With Thorne and most of his crew in custody, the immediate threat was over, but Silas was still out there. Hours later, Alara stood outside the battered house, leaning against the hood of a police cruiser. The sun was setting, painting the Memphis sky in hues of purple and orange. Detective Reyes approached, crossing her arms thoughtfully. You'll need to come down to the station to give an official statement, Camila said gently. Also, we'll help you get your phone back and see if any of your personal items were stolen. Alara nodded. Of course. Thank you, Detective. You saved my life today. Camila managed a small smile. Actually, Miss Vance, you saved your own life. We just helped at the end. They shared a moment of mutual respect, two strong women, each fighting corruption in their own way. Evan approached, phone in hand. We got ID confirmations on all the suspects. Thorne's injuries aren't life-threatening, but he'll be in the hospital for a while. Malachi too. Leo has already started giving up details on Silas in exchange for a plea deal. Looks like the department's about to get a serious shakeup. Alara exhaled, the tension of the day slowly draining. What about Silas? Camila shook her head. He got away. But now that we know who he is, we'll find him. Your testimony about his operations will be invaluable. We're also searching the property for evidence of other crimes. Meanwhile, we'll get your mother to a safe place. Alara felt a rush of gratitude. Thank you, Detective. Camila placed a reassuring hand on Alara's shoulder. It's my job, but watch your back. Silas might try to retaliate. Over the next week, Alara was busy giving statements, meeting with internal affairs investigators, and protecting her mother. The story blew up in the local news. Corrupt cop exposed in kidnapping ring, read the headline of the commercial appeal. The city buzzed with outrage, forcing the police chief to hold press conferences addressing the systemic corruption. For Alara, each day was a whirlwind. She was called a hero, though she felt more like someone who just barely survived. She knew the scars, both physical and mental, would linger for a long time. Her mother, Vera, cried with relief when Alara finally returned that first night, battered but alive. Lord, my baby, Vera whispered, hugging Alara fiercely. Alara teared up, though she kept it together. She didn't want to worry her mother more than necessary. Camila Reyes visited Alara's apartment a few times, accompanied by other honest officers, to discuss the ongoing case. She gave Alara updates. Leo was cooperating fully, revealing addresses of stash houses and implicating more crooked officers. Malachi, for his part, was borderline catatonic, but he'd confirmed Thorne's role in orchestrating countless crimes. Thorne faced multiple felony charges. Silas was still at large, though there were leads in Arkansas and Mississippi. Despite the progress, Alara didn't feel entirely safe. Silas was the type to hold grudges. She started varying her routines, using different stores, changing bus routes. The VA hospital visits for her mother's prescriptions became tense affairs, with Alara scanning the surroundings for suspicious faces. Yet life had a way of moving forward. Bills still had to be paid. Groceries still had to be bought. Day by day, Alara inched back toward normalcy. Though normal now included being armed with a small .380 pistol she legally obtained. Camila had nudged her toward the right channels for a concealed carry permit, understanding Alara's unique situation. One afternoon, 2 weeks after the rescue, Alara was stepping out of a small corner store with a bag of groceries when she felt a piercing stare. She glanced around. A black SUV, familiar. She froze. It was Silas's vehicle, or one just like it, parked down the street. Her breath caught. She needed to confirm if it was him. As discreetly as possible, she moved to a vantage point behind a large parked truck. She peeked around. The SUV's tinted windows hid the driver from view. Her phone vibrated in her pocket. She quickly checked it. An unknown number calling. Heart hammering. She answered, keeping her eyes on the SUV. Hello. A low voice replied. You thought we were done? She recognized Silas's sneering tone. "You're making a mistake calling me," she said calmly, forcing down the surge of adrenaline. "Thorne might be finished, but I'm not. You cost me a lot, Miss Vance. You can bet you'll pay." The call ended abruptly. The SUV roared to life and peeled away. Alara inhaled deeply. If Silas was personally stalking her, the threat was real. She headed straight to the precinct to inform Camila. After hearing Alara's account, Camila launched an immediate investigation. Patrol cars began frequent drive-bys of Alara's apartment. The department also arranged an emergency safe house for her and Vera. But Alara had a stubborn streak. She was tired of running. Still, safety for her mother came first. Vera was temporarily moved to a facility with better security under the guise of advanced medical care. Alara made sure her mother understood it was for her own protection. Then Alara made a bold decision. She offered to assist Camila in taking Silas down. She knew his tactics, had been inside his operation, and suspected he would keep coming after her anyway. Camila was reluctant to involve a civilian, but Alara argued that her military background made her more than capable. Eventually, Camila agreed to let Alara act as a consultant, albeit unofficially. They pored over maps of the city, marking Silas's known hideouts. They cross-referenced phone records from Leo's confiscated devices. Each lead they followed either led to a dead end or had Silas's footprints, but always a step behind him. Days turned into a tense cat and mouse chase. Silas made taunting calls to Alara's phone at odd hours, leaving cryptic messages about how she had no idea who she was dealing with. Alara refused to be intimidated. She stepped up her training regime, running early in the morning, practicing at the shooting range with guidance from Camila. Her old army reflexes began to resurface in full force. A break finally came when a minor player in Silas's ring was arrested trying to smuggle firearms across the state line. This man, sweating under interrogation, gave up the location of a secret warehouse on the outskirts of Memphis, near the industrial park. He claimed Silas was moving his operation there to avoid the intensifying police crackdown. Camila organized a multi-unit raid. Alara accompanied them in an unmarked SUV, wearing a bulletproof vest. She insisted on being part of it. Silas had made it personal, and Camila allowed it under the strict condition Alara follow her lead. Just before dawn, a convoy of police vehicles approached the warehouse. They parked half a block away, moving in silently on foot. The plan was to surround the building, block all exits, and force Silas's crew to surrender. But Silas was cunning. The moment the first officer stepped on the gravel, a guard dog inside began barking furiously. Floodlights erupted around the warehouse, and muzzle flashes tore through the dim sky. Silas's men were ready, firing from the windows. The police ducked for cover behind concrete barriers. A full-fledged shootout erupted. Alara took cover behind a police SUV, scanning the windows. She spotted Silas at a second-floor window, shouting orders to his men. Camila signaled for a flanking maneuver. Alara nodded, heart pounding, as she joined a squad of officers circling to the rear entrance. Gunfire cracked in the early morning air, the smell of cordite stinging Alara's nostrils. She crouched low, following Camila and Evan. Another policeman took point, blasting the door hinges with a shotgun. The door swung open, revealing a large interior cluttered with wooden pallets and crates. They entered swiftly, weapons up. Silas's men opened fire from behind stacked boxes. The officers returned fire, bullets zipping across the space. Alara advanced, stepping in time with Camila, covering each other's angles. Her mind was eerily calm, as though she were back on a mission overseas. Shots echoed off the metal walls. Alara spotted a figure sprinting toward a side staircase. Silas. She peeled off from the group, determined to follow him. Camila shouted, "Alara, wait." But Alara was already moving. Silas darted up the stairs to the second level, which overlooked the warehouse floor. Alara pursued, weaving between crates. She heard footsteps behind her, Evan perhaps, providing backup. She reached the top floor, scanning for Silas. The catwalk was dimly lit, making visibility difficult. She inched forward, gun raised. Suddenly, Silas burst out from behind a steel support beam, firing wildly. Alara dropped flat, returning fire in short bursts. Silas cursed, ducking behind a cluster of crates. They were locked in a deadly standoff. Alara's ears rang from the echoes. She steadied her breath, remembering her army training. Never let adrenaline override tactics. "Come out, you coward," Silas taunted, voice echoing. Your time's up. Alara crept along the catwalk, stepping carefully so as not to make noise. She heard scuffling footsteps, realized Silas was trying to flank her. She spun around, weapon at the ready. Silas emerged, gun raised. They fired simultaneously. Alara felt a searing pain graze her left arm, but she managed to squeeze off a shot that hit Silas in the chest. He staggered backward, shock painted across his face. She advanced, gun trained on him. Silas dropped to his knees, blood spreading over his black shirt. He tried to raise his weapon, but Alara kicked it away. It's over, Alara hissed. Silas looked up at her with a sneer. You think I'm the only one? This city's rotten, more than you know. Alara didn't falter. Maybe, but one piece of rot is gone. She kept her gun on him until Camila and Evan rushed up, handcuffs ready. Silas was done. His threat ended. After the raid, the city reeled from the shock waves. Silas's network was dismantled, exposing a web of criminal deals that spanned beyond just Thorne's crew. Local politicians scrambled. The police chief was forced to resign, and multiple investigations commenced to purge the department of corruption. Marcus Thorne, from his hospital bed, watched the news coverage of Silas's capture. He knew he was finished. Charges piled up, ensuring he'd spend the rest of his life behind bars. Karma had come for him in the form of a bullet, an exposed ring, and a brave soldier who refused to be a victim. Stonehouse, Leo, and Malachi each faced their own reckoning. Stonehouse was indicted on multiple assault charges. Leo's cooperation earned him some leniency, but he still faced prison time. Malachi, haunted by guilt, gave a full confession, unraveling the entire tapestry of Thorne's corrupt dealings. For Alara, the aftermath was bittersweet. Her physical wounds healed quickly, thanks to her strong constitution and thorough care. The mental scars, the abduction, fighting for her life in that grimy basement, would linger. She sought therapy through the VA, determined not to let the trauma define her. She also found a renewed sense of purpose. She'd confronted evil in her hometown and emerged stronger. Vera improved too, relieved that her daughter was safe. The city's wave of reform led to better medical support for veterans like Alara and safer communities for the vulnerable. Detective Camila Reyes was hailed as a hero within the reformed ranks of the Memphis Police Department, eventually promoted to lead a new anti-corruption unit. She and Alara stayed in touch, forging a friendship born from shared danger. In the weeks that followed, Alara found herself on local news channels, her story inspiring others to stand up against injustice. Neighbors she barely knew offered words of gratitude and support. Strangers wrote letters thanking her for her bravery. It was strange being in the spotlight, but Alara handled it with humility. She downplayed her heroics, attributing her survival to her army training and the timely intervention of Detective Reyes and the honest officers. Still, she agreed to speak at a youth center in her old neighborhood, hoping to steer the younger generation away from gangs and violence. On a warm Sunday afternoon, Alara visited the Mississippi riverbank, the city skyline shimmering in the distance. She closed her eyes, letting the breeze brush against her skin. She remembered the day she was kidnapped, how powerless she felt, and she remembered how her training, grit, and spirit helped her take that power back. Life was unpredictable, dangerous even, but Alara Vance had faced darkness and emerged a victor. For every bit of corruption that existed, there were also good people, Camila, Evan, the honest men and women in uniform, willing to fight back. As she stood by the water, she reflected on Silas's final words about the city's rot. Evil was a tenacious enemy, yet she firmly believed that with enough light, any darkness could be driven away. Her phone chimed, a text from Camila updating her on new arrests linked to Silas's case. Yes, Alara thought. The fight continued, but progress was being made. With a steady gaze at the horizon, Alara turned away from the river and walked back toward the heart of Memphis, determined to carve out a better future for herself, her mother, and the city she called home.